All right, welcome back. I hope you're having an amazing time so far. Our next panel is titled Inside Call Centers and Chat Support, a Human and Technology Perspective. Please join me in welcoming our panelists to the virtual stage. And I'll hand it over to Nadeem, our moderator.
Thank you, Patricia. This is a great panel here for a topic that's of a lot of interest in the industry these days, which is how are we impacting the call centers and the support that we provide to the customers, the reason for which the businesses live through AI. So with that said, I would like to go around so we can introduce our panelists. I'll start with Amber, you first, introducing ourselves a little bit, and I'll go around the room after that. Amber?
Hi there, my name is Amber Fensel. I am Senior Director of Product Development at Novant Health, based in Charlotte, North Carolina, overseeing a portfolio of emerging technologies focused on consumer digital experiences through our website, chat, our bots, and a variety of other digital tools that enable Novant Health to connect with our patients in a digital manner.
Welcome, Amber, to the panel. Derek?
Yes, hello everyone. Derek Roberti. I am the VP of Technology for Cognigy here in North America. And Cognigy is a conversational automation platform, which means we help companies automate conversations on both chat and voice channels. Cognigy is based here in North America in San Francisco, and we were founded in Dusseldorf, Germany. And I look forward to talking to everyone today about AI in the contact center.
Great. Welcome, welcome, Derek, to the panel. And I'll move on to Edmund.
Hey everyone, Edmund Ivington, VP of Global Partnerships at Unbabel. Delighted to be here, dialing in from London. Unbabel is a AI-powered language operations platform, and really what we do is remove language as a barrier within customer service and other multilingual use cases within the enterprise. We're at the intersection of AI and gig economy in terms of technology.
Welcome, Edmund, to the panel. And my name is Nadeem Saeed. I'm moderating today's session. I'm a VP of Quality for Verizon, which is the biggest telecom provider in the U.S. My responsibility in Verizon is to set up a quality organization that oversees the product development process as well as the service delivery process through the business processes, which gives us a very good view into the customer experience on the back end. And AI helps us in several of those areas, but most importantly around the call centers, where we truly engage with our customers and see how we can actually help them get the experience that's second to none. So really glad to be part of this panel today and moderating this panel with amazingly diverse experience. So thank you all for being here. Now, having said that, there are a few questions that have been submitted to us for the panelists. We'll go to the first question. And the first question is, which technologies are being used today to optimize the contact center? And for this question, I'll go to you, Derek, to kick us off and kind of give your perspective on.
Thank you. And the point of view I will take on this question is that today, very often, contact centers aren't really taking advantage of the latest technological options for automating their operations. Traditional automations really still dominate, such as IVRs with hierarchical menus and a lot of the rudimentary routing that we have in place. But the leaders in the space are automating in two areas. One is conversational automation, and then one is robotic process automation, or I might say more generally, business process automation. Conversational automation, which is kind of what Cognigy focuses on, or conversational AI, want to call it either of those terms, is really designed to replace hierarchical menu-driven IVRs with natural language interfaces. So this lets users express their needs directly without having to stumble through numerous menus to find out what they need. Conversational AI aims to understand users in their own words and fulfill on their requests through the backend automations. Where systems of record lack good APIs, conversational automation can take advantage of robotic process automation to help users complete end-to-end business processes without having to involve a human agent. And it's this combination of conversational AI and RPA that means fewer agents are required to address customer needs, and customers can get answers faster without having to wait on hold. So there's really a win-win in both cases. This is where we see a lot of value coming in from a technological perspective in creating better experiences, but it's also a place where contact centers, the best contact centers have made progress in this area of combining these technologies, but most contact centers may not even be getting started.
That's excellent. I appreciate that. Amber or Edmund, if you have anything to add, please feel free to add to this as well.
Sure, I can hop in. I think it's interesting when you take a look at the traditional call center and where certain organizations are embracing new technology to move forward and where there's hesitancy in others. I was doing some research and read that in 2019, about 48% of interactions in a digital manner were self-directed. And by this time next year, they're predicting about 85% of users will be looking to embrace a self-directed digital format to self-serve. And we have an increasingly more savvy user base. And so call centers embracing AI and allowing and enabling their consumers to self-direct, I think will find themselves ahead of their competitors, and also truly providing greater service and experience and making that human agent available when necessary, but recognizing that it's not always needed nor wanted by the users.
Excellent, excellent. No, I really appreciated that. That's a good good input. Thank you for your input. Patricia, would you give us the second question? All right. So the second question is a really important one, because it talks about how can this artificial intelligence be leveraged within a call center, and with some examples, if we have some specific examples. And Edmund, I was going to come to you with your background, if you could help us with some real examples around how we can leverage AI.
Yeah, thank you. I think the danger and maybe the shift we're seeing over the last couple of years is that AI, especially in call centers, but more generally in the enterprise, was in tiny bubbles. It was used in the fringes by an innovation team who fought someone for some budget. And things were never particularly rolled out to scale, and they were certainly never particularly rolled out so that they impacted a large percentage of consumers in a meaningful way. And that's definitely started to shift the last few years. So I mentioned that we live at the intersection of AI and gig economy, but actually they're just buzz terms. What we really do is language. And we take this thing that is never going to go away as a problem, which is the fact that people speak different languages, and we solve it within the context of the call center so that you can always have the best agent giving the best possible answer to the end consumer, no matter what language that's happening in and what channel that's happening in. And what we're seeing is that although 5, 6, 7 years ago, some of our customers were starting off by nibbling around the edges. Maybe they pilot with one language, or they take a low tier of customer support to test it out with. As soon as they saw meaningful results, as soon as they saw that this actually gave them operational flexibility, actually reduced their bottom line considerably, and allowed them to consolidate, whether it be the vendors or the locations they'd had to pick because of language over the last decade, they could make hugely strategic advances. So what they could do is they could knuckle down or double down on their centers of excellence. So let's say they had an amazing high-performing CSAT team in the Philippines. They could build out around that team, for literally around the brick and mortar, around the management structure, around the amazing agents, the high tenures they have, and focus their energy and resources there to give more consistent support around the world in every language. And this is what we're seeing is whereas before it would be someone dabbling in a chatbot when you talked about AI in the call center industry, these impacts are starting to become much bigger. And rather than talking about maybe 10 or 50 agents in the corner either being displaced or enabled by AI, we're talking about thousands and sometimes tens of thousands of agents being superpowered by AI. And I think, this is where a lot of our technology conversations go today, is that it's not about replacing, it's about enabling. It's about saying, yep, you have some amazing people doing this work. The reason we're talking about call centers today is because people in these call centers are not going to go away. And so actually we all need to focus the conversation around what can we do to help them do their job even better and keep them in the call center even longer and make them feel like they're going to have more of a career there and give them more possibilities. And I think I'm certainly feeling that, especially in the last 2 years, as all of these companies have been pressured by the situation we're in to do more with less in a sudden knee-jerk way. Things are happening faster and at bigger scale.
Yeah, very insightful, Edmund. And I can tell you from my own experience, I think when you're talking about a company like ours, where we have 140 million plus customers, and then you're actually launching new product and services almost on a daily basis. It becomes very important that when the customer interacts with you, how do you really proactively have all the info and can resolve that? And I think, Amber, you were mentioning about even the customers moving towards self-serve. I mean, I think that trend is something that demands that some of these technologies are integrated into that service model, but because that drives CX. And then the aspect, Edmund, that you're talking about, which is really around cost, right? When you have millions of customers, even 1% of them giving you a call on a daily basis could bring your business case down. So it's very important that even to drive the cost efficiencies, some of these technologies are used. So we see those as we see some very, very specific examples on the contact centers that if you bring in AI into that helps both CX and cost. So really, really insightful. So that's really good. Amber or Derek, would you like to add anything to this in terms of leveraging AI?
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick, Derek, and then give you the mic. One thing that wasn't mentioned that I think is not always on the forefront of implementing AI technology is, yes, there is a capability and a functionality set that you receive that is emerging, but the insights that you can gain from those technologies is incredibly valuable, because that is firsthand consumer insights from what are they typing in, what are they asking, and then being able to analyze and use that data to change your business model, to address your concerns. For example, we implemented a site search chatbot on our website. Very patient focused, very consumer focused. And through the insights from the bot, we actually identified a large population of our own team members and employees that were using the site search to inquire and look for internal resources. And so that is now going to drive a new use case for us to be able to serve internally. We would have never known that had we not been capturing that data from their own use and analyzing it to be able to identify. And so I think one of the great ways call centers can leverage AI is the data that is firsthand information that they're able to collect from the consumer.
Very well said, Amber. Go ahead, Derek.
It's a great insight, because I often think of the example of, if you come from a background as I do from website analytics, one of the things that you see is drop-off pages. So people go to some page on your website and stop, but from an analytics perspective, they just kind of disappear. Or in traditional IVRs, people might hang up the phone, and you know that these are drop-off points, but you don't know, did people hang up or leave because they got their problem solved or figured it out on their own, or because they were frustrated or couldn't find the information they need. But especially, I'm on the conversational side, to be able to actually see what were people thinking and saying at these moments where they end an interaction is incredibly valuable, as you were saying. But I wanted to talk a little bit from an examples perspective about conversational automation and to kind of flesh it out a little bit. So conversational automation or conversational AI uses natural language understanding to interpret what a user says to help them solve a problem. So there's really two pieces to this: understanding the user and then taking action on their behalf. Understanding the user happens in one of three ways, I would say. First, it could be taking care of the pre-call activities to optimize the time with the live agent. So that can be the initial diagnosis or triage, or it can be authenticating users. But the idea is to tee up the human interaction to be as efficient as possible. The second kind of value of natural language understanding can be deep linking to the customer's intent. So instead of making them go through the multiple levels of hierarchical menus, to just be able to start the conversation, express what they want, and get routed to the answer immediately. And then finally, and perhaps most powerful, is walking the user through an end-to-end process, such as determining an invoice is due and then taking payment for it, or letting a user upgrade their seat on a flight. So that's the understanding part. Taking action on behalf of the user means really connecting the user to the required systems of record, which could really be anything from CRM or ERP or HCM or ITSM, or any of the systems that hold the data related to the user. And it might be several systems for a single transaction. So the automation side of conversational automation can orchestrate these interactions between multiple systems on its own, or in conjunction with RPA platforms, like I was mentioning earlier.
Good, good. No, I appreciate great perspectives. This is great. So, so having said that, I think we have a few more questions lined up. Patrika, if you can give us the third question, which is around, as leaders, when we deploy some of this stuff and we understand what the value add is, but what are the challenges that these leaders and organizations face when you're leveraging this AI within call centers? And I think that would be a good perspective to get from each one of you. But I'll start, Amber, from your perspective. What are the challenges you see in your organization as you leverage some of those technologies and examples?
Sure, I have a personal passion here, so I have a call to action for all of you listening in. I believe that organizational readiness is potentially the single most important factor that contributes to failure for project implementations such as this. When you are thinking about implementing AI in a call center, you have almost very opposite, typically and historically very opposite perspectives of operations and users and skill sets and technologies. The IT department, the CIO, is going to be bringing forward this new capability, most likely. Oftentimes, the call center operations teams may be on the receiving end or not brought along for the selection process and the requirements gathering and really understanding what is the business need and the problem that's trying to be solved. So my call to action for you all is to think about your operational partners and how they are being brought along in the identification, the ideation of that project, and taken through in lockstep with you to have a say, to have an understanding, to have context that's built along the way. And I believe on the receiving end of the implementation, using the technology, teaching their teams, and creating the passion within their teams to embrace the new technology will be astronomically larger and more successful. The adoption can really fail when there is lack of buy-in. So from my perspective, I think that hesitancy can be mitigated with bringing your partners with you along the way and following good change management organizational readiness practices.
Excellent. Well said, Amber. And Derek or Edmund, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I kind of think about these barriers as being kind of 5 in the contact center space, and I promise to cover them quickly. But the first one is in the contact centers, legacy applications. And the funny thing is, in many ways, contact centers are running just fine on legacy on-premise systems. So there isn't a lot of pressure to make a change. And there often isn't really an opening for more modern cloud-based solutions. So there's something good enough in place and not enough pressure. At the same time, so the second thing is kind of that there's these legacy scars. Because legacy software has been so difficult to implement, there's a hesitancy and a fear to take on any changes that could be a heavy and expensive IT initiative. The third thing is kind of a mindset, which is like an overly operationalized thinking. And by this, I mean, the contact center by its nature is a heavily operational environment. So the focus is really workforce management and optimization, training, QA, coaching, and meeting all the metrics that we all kind of look for. Keeping the machine running while managing costs tends to be top of mind when exploring new technologies, even if these technologies could be game changers, and looking at these things can kind of seem like a luxury at times. The fourth thing is the lack of a recurring budget. So AI and automation technologies are new line items, and contact centers aren't in the habit of adding them to the budget or even knowing how much to budget in the first place. So kind of how do you get started from a money perspective? And finally is lack of talent. So contact centers don't know what skill sets they need and how much they need to lean on IT for helping them set things up and maintaining them. So those are a lot of challenges that require some ambition, some strategic thinking to really be able to drive change and have these game-changing technologies enter your operations.
Well said, Derek. And that was a pretty comprehensive list of the barriers that I would say that in some shape or form, even I see that in Verizon. So I think that's fundamentally, and Amber, to your point of the change management piece of that is paramount. Recognizing that you sometimes are changing the core of your organizations and really bringing everybody along in terms of building technical capabilities and and all that is extremely important. So very well said. Edmund, anything you want to add to this?
Yeah, just really a more macro level, that what was interesting to me coming into this industry from the outside is even though customer service or call center agents use technology every day, it was a very undisrupted part of the world, right? It was essentially still a bums on seats business, and largely is. And that's interesting because it's very at odds by the nature of this conversation, which is about AI, which is essentially removing the amount of human effort needed in lots of parts of this call center world. And so this is like a natural tension that exists in many parts of the world, manufacturing and others right now, but is pretty profound, because actually when you look at how this industry operates, which is a few very large outsourcers with hundreds of thousands of people that make very low margins based on the number of people that other companies hire from them, it's quite tough to go in and say, hey, how about we reduce your number of heads by 10%? That's going to be great. And so the way we've done it is we've started reselling our solution through these large contact centers, the Teleperformances, the Concentrics of the world, who actually are desperate to disrupt themselves before they get disrupted, and are incredibly excited about being able to increase their margins by using technology, but are not particularly set up for that behavior, right? They're not particularly already agile startup-esque organizations. And so for us, those partnerships are really fun. And, we are constantly finding really great ways to accelerate that journey for everyone involved, whether it's the brand who wants to do it with AI, or the BPO who wants to use more AI to increase their margins, but also doesn't particularly want to let people go. And so that is a natural challenge that I think everyone in this call is going to be facing, which is, okay, this is all great and this sounds great, and you can spin it by saying empowering humans to do better, but in reality what we're talking about is less jobs. And so you've got to be very tactful in the way you approach this, and you've got to be very sensitive, and you've got to be very mindful of locations like the Philippines, where their biggest GDP contributor is outsourced customers and call center agents. And you start messing with someone's biggest GDP contributor, and you're really having a negative impact on a region of the world. And so I think it's, for me, it's about the honest conversations. It's about making sure the senior leaders are truly being transparent and not having any hidden agendas, and are, a little bit like your carbon footprint, making sure they're mitigating some of the things that they will naturally have to do.
Perfect. This is great. Great perspective from all of you. I mean, this was an important question, and great input. Patricia, what's the next question for the panel? So the next question, and I think this is a little bit what I think, Edmund, you were talking about as well, which I'll bring back to you, which is that, when you look at this artificial intelligence and you look at what, and then how we're deploying this, do you think that it's enabling better ROI from call center operations? Do you see that? You just mentioned some of the barriers and sensitivities and all that. So how are you seeing that in the industry today? Do you see that the realization of the benefit, what AI promised, is it there or not? So I'll begin with you, Edmund, on that.
Yeah, I'll give you a couple of examples to illustrate this. So one of our customers, Microsoft, naturally covers a huge amount of consumers at a huge amount of languages, some significant scale involved. And interestingly, one of the problems is that in certain places it didn't add up. Supporting Hebrew for Xbox 24/7 or supporting Nordic languages in certain pieces of the business didn't really perform in an optimized fashion because language was just another axis, and it was an issue. And so what we ended up doing with them is doubling down on some of their highest performing teams, actually in India, with teams already supporting that business line, and empowering them with our solution, which effectively means that they can then handle Japanese or simplified Chinese or Norwegian. And what we saw, which was interesting, is not only did we see that productivity was maintained, we saw that CSAT went up, effectively just because you were using better agents who'd been around longer and were more skilled, by about 5 to 10 points. But most importantly, we saw a 50% cut of the footprint. The cost straight up went down by 50 to 54%. And so this is where you start to get interesting when you're talking about companies as large as Microsoft being able to carve out that much cost from their footprint by literally just flicking the switch using AI to something they're already doing successfully somewhere else, and consolidating other parts of footprint and vendors and things that would have been very useful for them to save other money that we didn't even capture. It starts to turn C-level heads. And a second example is Logitech, another one. Pandemic at the start, where in parallel to all the call centers in the world shutting down, everyone also decided to buy a webcam. And so this was a sort of a tough little piece of the world for them to manage, where they suddenly had 300% increase in their webcam orders and literally sold out of webcams around the world, which is a unique situation to be in, which of course also means a huge uptick in call center inquiries. And so what we allowed them to do is two things that I found fascinating. Number one is, as the Philippines went down, so literally everyone got sent to work from home, what they managed to do is turn on all languages from their Mexico call center using us. So we partnered with their CRM vendor, which is Zendesk, and their one of their BPO vendors, which is Concentrix, and allowed a seamless flow from the Philippines to Mexico within minutes. So there was no interruption to service, which was good because service was going through the roof at that time. And then the second thing is they needed to dramatically increase their staff. So what we allowed them to do is, using this new model where they could use their best performing low cost footprints, we allowed them to keep up with demand, but keep the cost flat. But actually, that was pretty amazing because the demand was going through the roof at this point. And the second thing is we allowed them to get down from a 12-week hiring period to a 1-week hiring period for a skilled agent. And this is all powerful stuff in the midst of chaos and different countries going offline and no one really knowing what was going to happen next. And so these are, I think, some of the profound examples where you take a sort of abstract concept of let's throw AI into a call center and automate some stuff, and then start saying, okay, at a very human level, at a very consumer level, what actually matters? Just maintaining customers getting their stuff sorted out in a very quick turnaround time, and making sure that everyone's happy and CSAT is either going up or staying the same if it's already good. And not much else matters. And I think when you come back to those fundamentals and everyone channels their attention to them, we end up in a very good place. And as you say, the ROI tends to be very, very high on these projects.
Perfect. And Derek and Amber, how are you guys seeing where you guys are at? Maybe I'll start with Derek, you first.
Yeah, so there's a couple of facets, I think, to the ROI question. The first is kind of, as Edmund was suggesting earlier, is think about anywhere in the contact center or in your organization where you're paying to have interactions that don't require human judgment or human empathy. Think about kind of where your agents just looking up information or acting as order takers. Those are good places to start to thinking about how can we automate this, provide a natural language front end that's easy for your customers to use, and then really automate all those back-end interactions. So you're only pulling in humans for more complex cases. You can have fewer, more experienced agents handling a lot of the workload. And as Edmund was saying, you can do this in any language. But another aspect of thinking about ROI is thinking about how you can scale in ways that were simply impossible before. So early on in Cognigy, we met with a CMO of a larger organization. They were about to do a several $1 million ad spend to drive people to a set of landing pages on their website to sign up for their service. Mm-hmm. The challenge is they knew that they'd get this quick surge of volume, but they weren't able to scale their contact center up for the month that the campaign was running and then scale it back down. They just could train and hire and go up and go down that time frame. When they looked at it from an automation perspective, they were able to automate a large percentage of those interactions so they could handle this kind of huge amount of inbound that they were trying to generate in a way they couldn't before. So there's on the one hand of like, how do you reduce costs based on your current operational model? And then the other end is what does AI enable from a scale perspective that would have just been too complex before?
Good. No, that's excellent. Amber, any thoughts from you on the ROI piece?
I do, a slightly different perspective, actually. So in healthcare, there is an expectation to connect with a human, to have compassion, to show empathy, and be available for patients when they need us, in a variety of channels, platforms, times of day. And so in one of our recent implementations, we used a voice bot to provide frequently asked questions for COVID vaccinations. And it was largely successful, 91% of successful conversations, if I remember correctly. Yet we still had over 20% of callers still asked to speak to an agent. So we know in our space in healthcare is where I'm coming from today, that we still have to ensure that human agent and interaction is preserved and is available as desired, as requested. Our primary demographic for Novant Health in the digital space is females from 20 to 55 years of age. And they are preferring to connect with us digitally and on mobile. We know this from our research. And so we have to find a fine balance of offering the self-directed information that they can get access to at 11 o'clock at night when they finally got the kids put to bed, and then also allowing them to chat with an agent if they've got a question, or if they finally need to call in, then certainly having an agent available. But that, if you think about from a ROI perspective and that demographic, that is spanning the millennial and the Generation X population. So you have young females coming into pregnancy and wellness journeys. You have them entering into the maternity journey. Then they may be entering into selecting pediatrics and healthcare for the family. The CEO of healthcare at home is often the mom. And then also they're caretakers for aging parents. So in that population, the potential for revenue and patient acquisition is incredibly large. So we have to find a way through digital communication manners, through things like AI, and then upskilling our agents to deliver and be available for that white glove service that is expected, is where I think the call center has an opportunity to become more of a revenue stream and less of a cost center. But it does involve looking at where's your market and what are they demanding, and how do you upskill those agents that when they do get that FaceTime and they do have that interaction with those patients and potential patients, that they have an exceptional patient experience, that they feel cared for and empathize, because they then become the first impression for loyalty, for healthcare selection. So I look at it not as labor arbitrage as some in the call center operations unit may be concerned, and more of an opportunity where call centers can become more of a profit center, given the right focus and skills and opportunities to develop those team members.
That's an excellent perspective, Amber, and I'm so glad to hear that, because I think that's how we've been thinking through this as well. Because for us, I mean, if we deploy these technologies for customer experience, any uptick in the NPS and the customer sat is directly translatable in terms of the revenue generation. And it's the key. I think the key thing here really is these are the technologies that as leaders, we've got to figure out how to deploy. And there are various ways of then, going after that ROI, be it cost, be it revenue. But I'm really glad, great perspectives from all of you guys. So this brings us to the last question, which I think is kind of important, because I think what we've talked so far, Rick, if you can put up that question, it begs this question now that if we now have talked about all of this ROI pieces and technologies and everything else, how are we looking in terms of the call centers, and 7 years from now or some time from now, how do we all anticipate call centers to be? So I think this is an important question that for all of us, kind of looking forward and saying, all right, envisioning a different future, how would that future would be? So if you want to, talk, and Amber, I'll start with you since you were the last one talking about this. How are you seeing through this as you look at the lens, in the future, how call centers evolve with AI?
Yeah, so in my last response, I alluded to my thoughts there, and that is building out exceptional consumer experiences will require an investment in those team members that will be interfacing, whether it's digitally through a chat or it's verbally through phone. I personally believe that we have the opportunity to turn those call centers into revenue centers and profit centers, but it will require a different way of thinking and looking at how do we bring in the technology, and then how do we repurpose those agents to do outbound work and to be exceptionally prepared, or to use the insights that we're gaining from the AI and that technology to then have very personalized outbound messaging to those patients where we can provide that exceptional service. And I think another layer to this that we haven't talked about, it's probably a completely different panel, would be how the disjointed and siloed messaging point solutions that many of our companies have, whether in healthcare or other industries, are contributing to a less than optimal customer experience, consumer experience. And so I think the call center becomes a piece of that in the future if an organization can get their arms around a consolidated messaging layer or platform where it is orchestrated and we know what the patient's preferences are, And if they prefer to be texted or they prefer to be called, then that call center can become the hub for that outreach. Whereas today, they are just one of the many points of outreach that occur to a patient, and it's not orchestrated. And so it's less than optimal.
Perfect. No, that's great, great input. Derek, how are you seeing where you're at, and how would you characterize the future call center?
Yeah, so often I think by analogy of previous experience I've had in the digital marketing domain. But if you look back in the pre-digital era, when you did marketing initiatives, there were some initiatives that you could measure, like direct marketing, but there was a lot that you couldn't, stuff that you just put out there and hope that it gave you results. As we've been more sophisticated and had more technologies to allow tracking and reporting of the performance of campaigns on the marketing side, you would never really envision a new initiative if you didn't know how to measure it. And in terms of kind of by analogy, to think about the contact center of the future, what I hope to see is as we think about introducing new business processes, even before they hit the contact center, along with that process definition is consideration of how do we automate this? How does this fit within our existing automation stack, whether that's RPA or conversational automation or what it is, so that there's really a hand-in-hand movement and coordination around new opportunities and the automation technologies that enable it. So from Cognigy's perspective, the contact center of the near future will be significantly more automated. And human labor, it's going to become all the more critical as it'll be focused primarily on the interactions that require human judgment, product knowledge and expertise, empathy, and flexibility. The full automation stack from conversational automation to RPA to the full suite of business process automation offerings is really ripe now. And over the next 5 to 10 year timeframe, contact centers are going to start taking some chances, investing more and organizing as much around automation as they're organizing today around human workforce management.
Perfect. I appreciate that. And I'll ask the same thing for your perspective on this as well, because this is an important topic for all of us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very clear that the best part of my job is when I go to these call centers, is when I step foot and see, 100 agents in the room, and the ones in the corner wearing Unbabel t-shirts are the super agents who are empowered to do it in every language, and they feel great because of that. And it's nice actually, because I started my career in a call center, and so I think the thing I'm very excited about is how the sort of slight negative, slight ceiling connotations with a call center job are definitely going to change. And some of this we've seen already, which is from, having to work in a specific building to moving towards a clearly hybrid environment where those who want to work in a call center and, it would be useful to have somewhere to go can, but also those who want to work from home, whether that's because of accessibility issues or because they just feel more comfortable working from home can, or somewhere in the middle, as most of us are learning to adapt to. Alongside that, all of the technology we've talked about today, meaning that a lot of these amazing individuals working in call centers are going to be doing more interesting work. They're going to be doing slightly higher value tasks. They're going to be better served by technology, better served by online learning, better served by better equipped managers, better technology around them, full stop. And so the potential, the ability to up-level themselves and the ability to, turn quite quickly, like I did, a call center job into a outbound sales job, into a call center management job, into a software sales job, or whatever you want to do in your early 20s, becomes a fairly easy, rapid thing thanks to technology. And I think it's all starting to come together, is my very blasé way of saying it, where the sort of levels of connectivity around different locations in the world, the adoption by certain large companies of these technologies, the force lever through the pandemic of work from home, and the fact that lots of organizations are finally coming to terms with the fact that if people just keep leaving every 6 months, months, it's not a good thing. It doesn't mean, you know, having them work till they burn out is not a healthy thing. Is starting to reach a moment where we can really make a call center career the jumping point for lots of other careers. And it in certain parts of the world, this is already the case, but in certain parts of the world, it's certainly got negative connotations. And I think a lot of our conversation today has sort of circled around this, whether it's taking away the boring jobs or whether it's empowering the more exciting jobs. I think it's all coming together nicely.
Excellent. These were great perspectives, and you know the way I look at it is there's a speech, there's text, there's video all over the place, right? I mean, there's a concept of mining, and as we're looking at, and I'm looking at task mining, process mining, and all of the other stuff that's happening in the industry, I think there is a thing called interaction mining, in my view, which is that every time a customer is interacting with you, they're leaving a lot of speech, a lot of text, a lot of video that you could actually mine in that interaction. And that interaction then you can really deploy for cost reductions. You can deploy this for employee satisfaction. You can deploy this for revenue generation. So when I look forward, I think that in about 5 to 7 or next year, and how the AI technologies are coming in, that really the call centers are seen as profit centers. I think that's, Amber, you used the terminology, and I love that. And I think it also goes to what Edmund, you were saying, which is that we will be seeing these roles not as, hey, you know, these are tough jobs. These would be the place where you're interacting with your customer and you know the heartbeat of your products and your customers, and you can be driving your company with that. So I think when I look forward into that, this interaction, as tough as it is, because you deal with tough problems when the customer calls, I think is where the gold mine of info is. And that's why I'm calling it interaction mining, which is really deploying some of these technologies for insights, to run your business, to run your company, to satisfy your customers, to satisfy your employees. So when I look at that, I think this call centers shall be enabling that through the use of some of these technologies. Now, having said that, thank you for your time and all of the answers and the wealth of knowledge that you have, and it was really brilliant, and I really appreciated and enjoyed our conversation. With that said, I think if there are no more questions, Patricia, I'll pass it back to you to bring us to close.
Awesome. Thank you so much to all of our panelists. This has been amazing, and you all have shared such valuable insights with us today. So we really appreciate you. And a very special thank you to Nadeem for moderating for us and keeping us on track. This has been amazing, and I know this virtual audience is giving you a huge virtual round of applause. Thank you again. For the audience, it's time for you to make your way to your next session. Along the way, make sure you accept your connection request and take some time to check out our amazing exhibits. Thanks so much, and we'll see you around.